Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to our podcast tonight. I am your host, Adam Krautwurst, and I am with Mr. Full-Time Fantasy himself, Jody Smith, the man, and Mr. Best Bell, the best bell I know, Bradley Stalder. I'm sorry, I did it again. Bradley Stalder.
I do it too. Just seems better. It's a lot easier to type too.
It's an industry standard, guys. You know, Theo Greminger does it all the time. So it took Billy Muzio months to get it down. It's all right. It's all right.
There you go.
I'm just trying to fit in.
Just call him Best Bell. It's way easier. You know what I mean? Way easier. But welcome to the show, everyone. This is our first show of the year. I'm excited. I couldn't wait all day to do this. I know we've talked together behind the scenes. Working on projections and working on articles and rookie videos and all that stuff. And so it's, I'm so excited to get together with you guys here live and go over some ADP risers and fallers. What do you think, Jody? Have you had a chance to do any FFWC drafts a little recently?
No, I thought about jumping in that one that you ended up joining. Was it last night or the night before?
We're going to do two nights ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll jump in the next one. I was doing, finishing touches on some AFC East previews that are fixing to be posted on the toolbox. And as you guys know, I spent the early part of, what was it? Is it May or last month in the dungeon, putting in all the projections. And then the three of us actually jumped on a call. Was it last week or the week before? We kind of touched base and, saw some things that maybe were egregious or that we needed to touch base on. But by and large, I think we, the initial run of projections was pretty good. And that's led to, some interesting opportunities to exploit ADP, which is kind of what we're about to talk about.
How about you, Brad? How's your draft life been recently?
I've been hitting in. I have one full-time fantasy draft in. That was back in March because they don't have paid allowed here in Michigan. So I had to take one of the free ones that were given away. But I was happy with how it's aged. I mean, the running backs need to sign. I have drafted Leonard Fournette and Ezekiel Elliott on that team. So I'm hoping that once we get to August that they do land somewhere. But the wide receivers are pretty strong, and that's a Mahomes-Kelsey stack team as well. So I'm not too worried about how it's going to age here. Other than that, I've been hitting the FFPC, the drafters. Underdog is still out of Michigan as well, so we'll be traveling to Ohio here very soon, Adam. We're going to be reunited, and we'll crank out some. Yeah, the FSGA. Adam and I are going to crank out some underdog drafts while I'm there, I'm sure. So, Jody, you're going to be missing an underdog party.
Yeah, well, life happens. I've gone to FSGA before. I highly recommend it for anyone that's considering or on the fence about it or hasn't had an opportunity to get and do that. Of course, we've got the expo coming up here in August. But yeah, I'll be doing a little remodeling and moving that particular week, so just not in the cards this time.
We'll definitely be drafting, and one thing I am excited about is the Superflex Bowl live over at the FFWC. I love Superflex, guys. I think to me, quarterback is the most important position in all of sports. So to be able to have drafts based around, hey, you got to take quarterbacks early. So let's do Superflex. Although now in any draft, quarterback in these tournaments, the quarterbacks, what Superflex or not, are going early. But Superflex Bowl is live over at the Fantasy Football World Championships, and it's grand prize of $5,000. So it's a nice little spending money there. Maybe we'll spend that over at the FSGA. What do you think, Brad?
Sounds like a great time.
It's funny you mentioned Adam about quarterbacks going earlier that, I've been turning in like expert rankings and things for over a decade now. And you just seen it slowly get up and up that this, in the last week, I turned in final rankings for a particular magazine that's coming out, and it felt dirty to actually put Patrick Mahomes as high as I did, but it just feels like the right thing to do. And at that particular time that I turned it in, I had it to where if you're following the draft exactly, it was pairing up Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. And if you can walk out of a draft in the first 2 rounds with those two, I don't see any better possible start when it comes to having your quarterback with, let's face it, Travis Kelce's the biggest advantage at any one particular position in the sport. So it felt weird, but it also, we got to change with the times.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, let's just keep this conversation going before we dive into the ADP risers and fallers. But it's weird going tight end quarterback to start, but it's kind of liberating. Like, now I don't have to take another one for a tight end or a quarterback for a long time. I mean, in these best ball tournaments, you can't go naked quarterback or naked tight end because you're going to go a week without, and plus you want to protect for injury too. I'm sorry, injury and bye week. But man, knowing that you got Mahomes and Kelce, and then just able to pound running back and receiver for the next 12 or 13 rounds really is pretty cool. What do you think about that, Brad?
Yeah, when we look at those elite, like the big three is what I'm calling them: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. Those three are in a tier by themselves. When we're talking about getting those accessing elite, like top 5 weeks, they are head and shoulders above the Joe Burrows of the world, the Lamar Jackson last year, the Justin Herberts last year. They put up nearly double the amount, double the rate of those quarterbacks in the next couple tiers. So you're trying to piecemeal your way to getting an elite week from quarterbacks that may not be drafted as early. So it's consolidation in position. It allows you to take more swings on other spots. Like if you decide to go, tight end, Travis Kelce round 1, Patrick Mahomes round 2, and then you just hammer wide receiver for 3 of the next 4 rounds or 4 of the next 5 rounds. And then you come back around and you go 0 RB, essentially, deferred 0 RB in a sense. So that is a way in which you can take more shots, more swings on those flex play types of players. If you're assuming one quarterback league, in super flex leagues, Adam, you've mentioned quarterback is king, but I think you also have to keep in mind, what are you giving up, in those other rounds? Like at what threshold, at what cutoff, are you saying, all right, at this point, the position players are more valuable, or this tier of quarterback isn't matching the tier of flex play that exists? So I think there's some nuance between that super flex tournament and your one quarterback leagues.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that more and more, obviously, as the summer goes on here, about the Superflex stuff specifically of, when to, how to build a roster and what positions are valuable when. And real quick, back to what you were saying there before we move on, is I know it's sick to think about taking a quarterback in the second round, but the way in standard 1 QB leagues, but the way that people are drafting recently, it's almost like, you're just flipping the rounds. Like if you were going to take Mahomes normally in the 3rd or 4th round, and now you're going to take him in the 2nd to stack with Kelce, all those running backs and receivers, because you've got Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, sometimes Fields, Burrow in the 3rd, Lamar now is creeping up. You've got these quarterbacks going high anyways. It's pushing the running backs and receivers down. So you're really just flipping those rounds, and you're getting the same kind of build, but you're just starting with quarterback earlier.
And you're hoping you're going to keep those flex type of players in the same tier, or at least very similar tier. You're not going to see a significant shift there. You mentioned the round flips. There may not be as much of a loss of EV as we're expecting, or that, these are elite quarterbacks. We're talking quarterbacks score the most points. Like top 5 quarterbacks tend to score more points than top 5 running backs, than top 5 wide receivers in standard scoring formats. And so if they have these massive weeks, that's going to be a difference maker, and you can have more sins forgiven if you've got your go-to one quarterback versus rotating through a probability that is this wide receiver 30% of the time going to get you a top 10 week, So there is some weighted differences between those.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And that's tier-based drafting is huge. You just brought it up. That's what really helps in the super flex leagues. Like, oh, when do I take a running back, a receiver? I keep going quarterback. Look at the tier, see what your tier says. Anything you want to say on that, Jody, before we move on?
I was just going to ask Bradley, you kind of answered, affirmatively with this, but Adam, I was going to ask you real quick, if you were to start off a draft at quarterback, tight end, presumably it would be Kelsey and Mahomes. Do you find yourself more willing there in rounds 3 through, 7, taking shots? Are you feel like, okay, I'm a little behind where I would normally expect to be? Because obviously, we're all team wide receiver start normally, but let's just say, when you get to that 3rd through 7th area, are you taking more shots, or are you just taking the best available? Or like I said, it feels like you kind of reiterated earlier. You said that it's kind of ugly the way it starts off because you're used to having, a couple of wide receivers, and all of a sudden here it is round 3. I don't have either. It feels weird. So personally, I feel like I start taking more shots like on my guys at that point. Like even if it's, half a dozen spots ahead of their ADP, I'm like, hey, I'm calling my shot. These are my guys. So I'm going to go ahead and just start taking guys early. It feels like I take a more aggressive approach when I start quarterback, tight end. That's why I kind of don't like doing it. But at the same time, it feels like the right thing. Because like I said, the advantage with Travis Kelce in your lineup is just off the charts.
Yeah, I usually go best player available from there on out, which is usually a receiver, like you were saying. But it's exciting too, getting that quarterback out of the way, because then when all the skill guys are dropping, right? Especially if we're talking about like super flex, when the skill guys are dropping and teams are still, so now they're taking, they got to take Kirk Cousins over like like a really good running back that's still there, where it's like I'm able to snag up, I can go get like a Ramondre Stevenson when they're taking Kirk Cousins because I've already got my quarterbacks early. I love being able to do that instead of feeling that pressure. I'm like, I got to get that second quarterback. Because in Superflex, you have to start a quarterback in your Superflex spot. If you're not doing that consistently, you're probably losing for sure. So so usually I'm best player available. And again, the tiers play a part of that. The pockets of the draft play a part of that too, in finding out who those players are. But I love going quarterback early in Superflex, and even starting with that Mahomes Kelsey start and then just pounding all those guys. And teams still need their quarterbacks, even if they wait on QB in a single QB league and they take their first quarterback. Another team takes their first quarterback and then 9th and 11th. There's still some really good skill guys there that I'm able to snag up while they're focusing on tight end and quarterback. So, so no, really good talk there. Love it. We're gonna be talking more about that as the summer progresses and someone's showing some drafts to all you guys. But yeah, let's get into some ADP risers and fallers. So, we've all been doing drafts all over the industry. This article that I wrote that I dove into here recently was the risers and fallers in ADP from FFWC specific leagues. And I found it's just so interesting how each site, each, place you go on has their own unique ADPs. And this one here, so we'll start with quarterback. I knew he was going to be a riser, but Anthony Richardson, Indianapolis Colts QB, I knew he'd be a riser, but I thought he would be more of a riser. His ADP is 154. He's only jumped up 54 spots since the NFL draft. He's still going super, super late as QB 24. I know Jody, you have him much higher in your rankings, I think, than QB 24. So I think you'd be willing to take him a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, it's more of a hedge thing. There's some trepidation with Anthony Richardson, and if you watched any amount of his film or whatnot, I think he had all of 393 passing attempts throughout his entire college career. So it's a little bit worrisome, but it's that ceiling, and that's what we're drafting at here. And in particular, it's really odd because at this time of year, as we'll talk about and as we'll see here in the next few minutes, dynasty zealots, that's who is kind of impacting this early ADP. So a lot of guys you see a lot higher than you're normally expecting, and things will kind of peter out here as the summer and the redraft crowd starts to come in. But with Richardson, you would expect him to be a lot higher. And in particular with the growth of Superflex leagues, which you just talked about. So, QB 24 seems like a really, really like low for him. So, and it's trending in the right direction. He's trending up and all that, but as of now, it's that unreal ceiling where you see the comps of him. The most popular one obviously is Cam Newton, and right off the bat, there were some concerns about Cam Newton as a passer. Less so than there is with Richardson, but and he put those to bed quickly. He just became such an effective option right away. So I expect Richardson will continue to rise.
Brad?
I mean, he's risen on other sites in a meteoric sense. In some other places, he's the consensus quarterback 11. I mean, getting him at quarterback 24 feels like theft at this point. If I could, if FFWC opens back up in Michigan, I would be drafting that every single day at quarterback 24, because at that point, what are you drafting for? You're drafting for ceiling. Like, if he doesn't hit, it's as good as CJ Stroud or Bryce Young hitting. Like, these rookie quarterbacks who don't have the elite rushing upside tend not to hit very much. We do see the rushing quarterback like Cam Newton, you mentioned, Jody, have a top 5 rookie season, even though he started out like throwing more interceptions than touchdown passes for the first half of the season. It's because of the rushing and the rushing touchdowns. That offense also for Indianapolis is getting head coach Shane Steichen from the Philadelphia Eagles, former offensive coordinator for Jalen Hurts. And I think that's going to be a major move for the Colts and how they design their offense. They have a person in place who knows how to use this type of quarterback. Remember, Jalen Hurts, the thing coming out of college was he's not very accurate, right? He's a rushing quarterback, and he fell to the second round because of passing concerns. But the Colts have a plan for Anthony Richardson, and I expect him to start week 1.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's best ball drafts over here at FFWC. I know that in lineup setting leagues, he's already up to 8th overall. We have, the eighth QB. We don't have any super flex data yet because it's just starting. So I think that's where he's going to get up into like the top 10-ish range there. I think will probably be where he settles in. So yeah, another QB on the rise a little bit. And I know he's been rising. My personal rankings is Lamar Jackson up 47 spots since the draft. I think a lot of that it has to do with just him re-signing there and them adding Zay Flowers along with Odell Beckham in the offseason. I know I've got Lamar as a top 5 quarterback this season, and I'm more than willing to take him at ADP and maybe even a little bit higher depending on my build. What do you think, Jody?
It's hard not to put him at QB5. I actually have him at 6, and it came down to me is I'm just a little bit higher on why is Justin Herbert? Why his name gave me I'm just a little bit higher on him, and it's just the fact that Lamar Jackson hasn't played a full season since 2018. Those are just factors. But yes, obviously with him with the rushing upside, sky high potential. And to me, it's a solid top 6, say, quarterbacks. I mean, there's like a mini tier. I think, our friend Billy used to call it the God tier quarterbacks, where you've got, Hurts, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes. But after that, I'm perfectly fine with Lamar, Joe Burrow, Herbert. Those guys to me are right there. And I feel more comfortable with them than, your next guy's going to be Justin Fields, probably on most projections and whatnot. But I like Lamar Jackson, and you hit on it. I think what you're seeing here with his increase in ADP is the fact that the contract situation settled. Where last we had heard, we weren't sure about his contract status, and then he had not long after he had a trade demand. So that was a huge concern for anyone that was drafting extremely early. But now that situation's been resolved, you got a new offensive coordinator in there that seems to be predicating an offense more on the passing attack. So sure, I'm on board.
Love it. Brad?
Yeah, offensive coordinator Todd Monken, he's going to increase the amount of passes We saw that happening in the multitude of other offenses that he's run. Lamar even came out today and was asked whether he was going to dial down the rushing, and the answer is yes. And so I wonder if that might bump up a little bit of my Zay Flowers trepidation. I was worried about Zay Flowers' landing spot, initially with Baltimore, but we'll see if he can, do a little bit more of the spiking near the end of the season. Also, the addition of Odell Beckham that's been mentioned before, I think is underrated. Beckham commands 20 to 25% of the target share, and he's going in the same range as Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. I think all three of them could be perceived as spike week values if you're stacking here with Lamar Jackson. And we talk about Lamar Jackson being, he's like quarterback 5 or quarterback. He's clearly a tier 2 quarterback with tier 1 upside. He can access the same ceiling as Mahomes, as Jalen Hurts, and as Josh Allen. But because of the concerns that Jody mentioned earlier with the injuries, he just can't stay on the field for all 17 games. We want to see that happen for him to, actually access, top 5 or the top. He could be quarterback 1 overall. That wouldn't surprise anybody.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we're going to do a lot of these podcasts together, and one word you'll never hear me say is trepidation. I don't even know what it means, but I'm sure it means what you meant it to mean. So I love it. But Jose Pena wants to know, do we think the early quarterback trend will last all draft season? This kind of goes back to the conversation we started the show with. And we can answer this pretty quickly. I personally think it will, once stuff starts this early in the offseason. It continues to go that way. Maybe not for a specific person. Like if you're drafting heavy quarterback early, maybe if you're going to max enter some of these tournaments, you want to diversify a little bit. Maybe you get away from quarterback towards the end. But I personally think that the quarterback trend is here to stay for this 2023. What do you think, Jody?
Agree. There's plenty of evidence that shows that taking one of these elite God tier quarterbacks is a big plus EV move. So, and I see what you're seeing in the industry is people have adjusted to that. And like you hit on, Adam, a few minutes ago, it's just like, I can relax. I don't have to worry about, quarterback all season. And, especially if you're in a 1 QB league and you get somebody that you expect to be on the field, like, Patrick Mahomes, who's been, except for that one season, other than that, he's been pretty durable. It's you don't have to worry about that. The most important position on the field or in sports, like you said, Adam, and you don't got to worry about it. So it's pretty reassuring. And then again, if anything, when you have redraft people come in, if anything, those people will actually cause quarterbacks to go even earlier. So yes, I do think you'll see quarterbacks maintain their slightly earlier ADP.
Brett?
Yeah, I think there will be a little dip, and we're seeing it right now with Josh Allen. Over the last 2 weeks in other sites, we've seen Josh Allen drop 7% of his ADP each of the last couple weeks. And like 7% doesn't sound like a lot, but for a player, that might be the difference between a full round. And I think that's partly due to, as we are further away from the season, the most certain position is the quarterback. We can, if Jody and Adam, if all three of us were to come up with a consensus top 10, we'd get 8, 9, or 10 of the top 10. We know who the good quarterbacks are, and we know it from the day the Super Bowl ends, right?
Yeah.
We know for the next season, it's going to be these quarterbacks. And so when it comes to this far away, we're drafting in May 24th. We know that there's so much green grass between now and August and September when these big drafts go off and the start of the season happens second week of September. We're going to see some quarterbacks, I think, continue to drip a little bit into the 3rd and 4th rounds now that we get more certainty with other players in the flex spots. Like, for instance, we're going to get more certainty with Calvin Ridley. We're going to get more certainty with Breece Hall. We're going to get more certainty with, name your player that there was a little trepidation about, and we're going to bump them up. So there's your word, Adam. But as we get closer, to the start of the season, we know more and we have more information, and the need to depend upon these reliable assets, isn't there as much because we have information about the other positions. So I think there is going to be a little, it's like a slow drip. It's not going to be this precipitous, avalanche fall of ADP. You're never going to see that. But is it going to be 1% this week? Is it going to be 2% this week? Accumulative over the course of the offseason. I think we could see Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd or 4th round. I think we could see Jalen Hurts 3rd or 4th round by the end of the season. But that's probably as far as they'll fall, because we know that, as Jody mentioned, they're God tier quarterbacks. They're going to give us an immense edge. But if Breece Hall is on his way back, I mean, he would have been a tier 1 running back for me, and arguably the 101 in some circles had he not torn his ACL. So we'll see, when we get to August and September. But I think that, if you can get a falling quarterback right now, that would be a nice closing line value.
Yeah, quarterbacks are going to stay high, because they're nice, because they don't bust as much, and they're safer and easier to predict and project, which is awesome. They don't get hurt as much, so that's good. That's good stuff. All right, moving on. So some of our ADP fallers at quarterback, Deshaun Watson. His drop in ADP. I think it's just that has come from some kind of collateral damage of all the quarterbacks kind of around him rising. He's dropped 29 picks. They added Cedric Tillman in the draft. I forgot to even write in the article that they added Elijah Moore. And I love Elijah Moore. I think a nice fresh start for him would be really good. They've got weapons there. So Deshaun Watson's a guy that I'm kind of on. I know the chat has been asking on how high Watson will rise. I don't think he'll rise too much, because again, I don't think he's in that God tier quarterback. He kind of used to be. That was a couple of years ago. He does have talent there. He could get back. It wouldn't surprise me, but he's just been so bad recently. Like, I remember being at the Expo and he was in preseason football. We're all sitting there watching going, this guy, what the guy can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah. Well, Adam and I were sitting around the bar with Jody and just watching on the TVs in Canton. And we're just gawking at like, Deshaun's not hitting those passes. Come on now.
He looked terrible, but I am a believer in him. So I think the falling is just coming from the rising for the quarterbacks around him. What do you think, Jody?
It's the same. There's nothing in particular that would have happened that's causing. I think people are maybe just branching out, taking a little bit more of Trevor Lawrence or maybe taking a shot on Justin Fields or whatever. But in my personal projections, I actually had Watson as my QB7. And as of right now, I haven't budged from that. So I think he's a nice value right now. But again, tell you what, when minicamp starts hitting and we get on the field and we start seeing some of the same concerns that you just hit on from last summer, that's when we can take a step back and be like, okay, this looks like it may be a permanent thing. And then we can move, Watson down into QB2 territory. But right now, he's proven when healthy and when on his game that he can be a top 5 difference maker every week. So let's see how he looks this summer.
For sure. All right, on to the running backs. Some running back ADP risers. No surprise here. Jerick McKinnon risen 46 spots. Coming back to the Chiefs. I think that's basically it in a nutshell. He's a cost-effective kind of scat back for them. Has those massive spike weeks as we've seen before. And right now he's going as the 48th running back off the board in FFWC best ball drafts. Brad, what do you think of Jerick McKinnon?
Yeah, I've just got questions of whether or not he's going to reprise his role, or if the reason why he was in his role was because Clyde Edwards-Helaire was hurt and that's it. Like, I just have questions. I want to know if the Chiefs, want to have it be Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon, all 3 rotating through, and that's going to be a disaster for fantasy, but actually nice for Clyde Edwards-Helaire late round drafters because he's going super late. But I'm also worried that this is Jerick McKinnon we're talking about, 31-year-old running back who has knee issues in the past, torn ACLs. It took him a long time. And we also don't want to be buying into a 10% touchdown rate because he had 10 touchdowns last year. He set career high in receiving yards. But this is also a running back that didn't get going until Clyde Edwards-Helaire was hurt. So, and we saw what Clyde Edwards-Helaire was doing before his injury. He was actually surprising a lot of people. Even though he was inefficient, even though he wasn't getting a lot of yards, he was still scoring touchdowns. We know the Kansas City Chiefs running back, generic running back, is a valuable position, but it's difficult to distill which running back you want in this backfield because Pacheco doesn't catch passes. Clyde Edwards-Helaire does it all, but doesn't do it all very well. And then Jerick McKinnon is old, but can catch the passes. So it's difficult at this point because he just re-signed.
Jody.
I would be cautious with McKinnon. He's rising in ADP simply because he re-signed in Kansas City because there are questions where he was going to end up. But there's zero chance he repeats 9 touchdown catches again this season. And let's not forget that Eric Bieniemy is no longer there, so we don't know how his role is going to change, how fewer targets and opportunities he may have there. And like Bradley just said, right now that backfield's a little harder to mix. I think we're all on team Pacheco, but we were all on team Clyde Edwards-Helaire at one time too, and that didn't work out too great for us. So I would approach all 3 of those backs with a little bit of caution. So just because McKinnon's on the rise now doesn't mean that he won't slide back down a few spots as the offseason warrants on. So it would, I think RB48 is fine where it is right now. He has I think a nice opportunity. I think if he maintains that role, he might can creep into top 40, but like I said, a little cautious.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's going at RB5, RB4 range. I think that's all those guys are worth a stab there. And like you said, Jody, we all like CEH stinks. Like I think we've all kind of learned that. It's funny. You go to you go over to Player Profiler, you go to their rankings, and one of the rankings is like really bad running back. I'm like, who is that? I click on the profile. CEH.
No doubt who was responsible for that.
That's right. he's just bad. And I just,
was that the easiest fifth year contract refusal that we've ever seen?
Yes.
Decline.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well,
I hate to think about it too, but man, what could the Chiefs have been if they're already a juggernaut. If they would have taken any running back but CEH there, you could have had Jonathan Taylor, Swift, all those guys like Dobbins, even Dobbins with one knee is better than CEH. But another riser, James Conner up 33 spots. I think he's rising because people are starting to get into the drafting and they're starting to get the projections and everything. They're looking like, wait a minute, this guy. They didn't add anything, any competition in the draft. They added a left tackle in Paris Johnson Jr. He has a proven track record of catching the ball. So listen, he's not a great player either, and he does have his injury concerns. But I think if you're getting him, it's like RB28 in that range is like an RB3. I think you could do way worse than James Conner. Brad, what do you think? Sorry, go ahead, Jody.
Well, James Conner is just so easy to root for. He's been a guy that I've. We all love what he's overcome, and it's a usage thing. And the guy's on the field 90-something% of every play. There's nobody there that's really a threat to take any touches from him. So he looks like a nice value.
Yeah, I mean, you're not scared of Keontae Ingram. Let's be real, guys. Okay,
right.
Look, even so the New England game was where Kyler Murray tore his ACL. James Conner, from that point on, New England game, running back 5. Week 15 against Denver, the next week, running back 12. Next week against Tampa, running back 4. Next week against Atlanta, running back 15. His floor is like a mid-pack running back 2. His ceiling is top 5. And you mentioned because it's volume, yeah, he's playing 80-90% of the snaps. There's no competition. And he's owed money for this year. Like there was no concerns like Joe Mixon or Dalvin Cook where, this guy could get cut or anything like that. No, like they're just going to run him into the ground. They're going to give him as many touches as he can handle. And we know he's going to give us 13 games, 14 games. But at the beginning of the season, Kyler Murray isn't expected to play. I put him at playing 13 games. Maybe it's going to be 10 games, but that was production while Kyler Murray was out. And I expect that the Cardinals are going to lean very heavily on James Conner to start the season.
Yeah, no, I love all that stuff. I agree with what you guys are saying. In the chat, they're asking, and we can put a pin in this till next time because I know we got a lot to get to tonight. But speaking of Bieniemy, you were talking about earlier, Jody, is Antonio Gibson role change incoming there, and for the Commanders, I like Gibson this year in any type of a role change from what he's had because I really do think he's a pretty good running back. All right, so some running back fallers here. We've got Tyler Algier. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. They drafted, Bijan Robinson, during the 2023 NFL draft, top 10 pick and all that stuff. So we don't really have to talk about Algier. We know what the deal is there. But I know, Jody, you want to talk a little bit about Bijan Robinson tonight. What are your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to ask you guys personally, because I've been looking at some things. I'm working on something, and you're seeing Bijan's ADP. I put it in what I'm working on it comfortably at RB3. It changes. Some places you'll see it at 4 or 5, like here at FFWC, but at other places you see it at 2. He's going as high as RB2. And of course, like I said earlier, things are skewed towards dynasty people right now, which I understand. But I'm having, can we say trepidation again? That Robinson is
word of the night.
Enough volume to return a positive investment on him being selected as RB2 or RB3. So you're taking him in round 1 of, let's just say a redraft, not a non-dynasty startup. And I'm having a little trouble with it. Just wanted to ask real quick what you guys think.
Well, Brad thinks I'm a Care Bear because I like those safety, those. He thinks I'm a Care Bear because I like safe running backs in the first round.
Look, I will never subtweet you. I will just reply. I love
it. But no, I think that, listen, I totally understand. You guys are projections guys. I understand the projections, how they can't get him to 1 or 2 or whatever. But to me, there's something in, a guy being a really good player and being outside of injury, being a safe player and getting volume. I know the pass volume probably won't be there to get him, to the CMC, to the Austin Eckler area. But like I said, I think there's something to be said about having, double-digit touchdown probability, getting all the goal line carries and all that stuff. I know Algier's still there, but I don't think, this is a coach that had Derrick Henry, where he just ran him. And I think that's what they want to do. They threw at a historically low rate last year. They would be, listen, I'm the biggest Kyle Pitts guy in the world. And they would be down 21 points in the second quarter and they wouldn't stop handing the ball off to Tyler Algier or Cordarrelle Patterson. Like, I just think that they want to do that. They want to run their running back. They want to give him 400 touches between carries and targets. So I'm big on him. I love picking at the back half of the first round and try to get him at RB4. But I wouldn't hate taking him at RB2 with that safety. Brad, go ahead. Trepidate all over my Bijan Robinson pick.
It's all right. I ran a regression of ADP compared to my best bell fantasy rating, which comprises floor and ceiling for veteran players. And then I said, okay, if a player is being drafted at this ADP, what is his rating going to be at? And I put Bijan I took his ADP at I think 7th or 8th or wherever he's going. And it fell to where running back 7 or 8 should be going. And, there are concerns that Tyler Algier is actually a good running back and that there's going to be 35% of the rush share given to Tyler Algier. Also, this offense doesn't run a lot of plays because it's slow, because they run the ball a lot. And they're also not a good offense because we can't trust Arthur Smith to put Desmond Ridder in a position to get the ball to Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan Robinson. He's given us 2 years of we can't trust this offense is good. So there's going to be a limited ceiling for the amount of plays, both from the offensive side of the ball, for scoring and sustaining drives, and also for the amount of touches that are going around. I still have Bijan Robinson projected for 330 touches. And how many touchdowns? 13 total touchdowns. So I'm bullish on him. It's just that I also see a pathway for other spike week candidates that we've seen in the past, really hit. And Bijan Robinson will need to outproduce his 7th overall ADP to become a value for you. And maybe, Adam, you want to be a Care Bear and you want to wear your seatbelt, and fine, but I'm not drafting him at this point in May. Like, I will take my RB2 shares in August and September. I'm not doing it here in May.
No, I get it. And I remember doing a Kentucky fantasy football state championship draft run by Farrell Elliott. I remember doing one on Super Bowl Sunday, this last Super Bowl Sunday, $1,000 entry fee. I know I'm a lunatic. I remember taking Bijan Robinson as the fourth running back and going, man, I probably just took him at his peak. Well, maybe not. Maybe I stole him at RB4 in the second
Adam,
round.
You want to hear a story? So I was asked to come on the Fantasy Pros podcast in January, and they asked me for a bold take. And I said that my bold take was that Bijan would be a top 5 running back for 2023.
Yeah.
And they laughed at me. Like, the other people were like, oh, okay. I mean, whatever. And
yeah,
I felt like that was pretty bold. And now it's not looking like that at all.
At all. No, I get it. So, all right, cool. So moving on here to receiver. We got some receivers that are rising here. Brandon Ayuk for the Niners. The price is fair for him as an up and coming wideout. I think, maybe there's some concern over who the quarterback is going to be here. If they came out and would just announce Brock Purdy's our guy, I would love Brandon Ayuk. But until we know that, I get nervous with him and Trey Lance and all the mouths to feed that they have over there. But to me, it's all about who the quarterbacks are going to be. Jody, where are you with Ayuk?
I think he's a nice value. It's starting to look like more and more like Brock Purdy is going to be the guy. Obviously, it'll be dependent on his health, but it sounds like things are trending in the right direction. Avoiding Tommy John surgery was obviously a huge deal, but last time, we've heard this week was that they fully expect him to be ready, come around this summer. So when that happens, yeah, I think you'll see Ayuk's value kind of sneak up a little bit, because they had a really sneaky little run there, to end the season last year, and it makes me want to get Ayuk. In particular, if I start off, at running back or tight end early in the draft, you get down to the range where he's going. He makes a really, really nice wide receiver 3-4.
Brad?
Yeah, so I'm looking here not at the wide receiver ADPs, but at quarterback ADPs. Trey Lance is going as quarterback 23 as the first quarterback for San Francisco off the board. Brock Purdy at quarterback 26. So if you want to have these cheap stacks with Ayuk and Kittle, and then you can easily get both of those quarterbacks, Lance and Purdy, for cheap. And you're not really hedging, because that the San Francisco quarterback, whoever it's going to be, is going to be extremely fantasy relevant. We saw that with Brock Purdy and his 4-touchdown game. I think that was during the playoffs, but still, you're able to see how, Shanahan is able to maximize the skills and get the ball from his quarterback to his position players, McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, all of it. So I think it's pretty smart to rotate through. If you're a Sam Darnold guy, I'm not a Sam Darnold guy, but if you want to rotate through extremely late, a couple shots on a third quarterback of Sam Darnold, fine. I don't hate that. The reality is whoever is going to be San Francisco's quarterback is way too cheap right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Mike Shope and I were talking about this earlier today on our podcast over at the Deep End. He, Purdy, I think the coaches want Purdy to be the guy. And I think Trey Lance, if they want to keep some trade value for Trey Lance, maybe it is keeping him on the bench and say, hey, we've got this guy here that still we think is pretty good, but Purdy's kind of our guy. Whereas if they start Lance and he bombs, then then the trade value is gone, right? So I think there's something to be said there. So, I would love for Purdy. Like, I like Lance better as a fantasy prospect over Purdy, but as far as the skill guys around him, for guys like Ayuk, give me Brock Purdy. Some wide receivers that have been falling recently. Jamison Williams, obviously, with the gambling issues going on there, and then Tyler Lockett. Big loser here in the draft from a dynasty perspective, from a redraft perspective, when the Seahawks added arguably the best receiver in the class, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I still like Lockett as a player, but I feel like his wide receiver 28 ADP might be a little too steep. We haven't talked about Njigba much, or maybe kind of filter that in here on what I know. Some people love Lockett, some people love Njigba. Jody, where are you with kind of that matchup there?
Oh, as a prospect, you love Smith and Jigba. I think the issue right now is usage. Few teams ran fewer 11 personnel last year than Seattle, and they were running a lot of 2 tight end set now. And Pete Carroll's already come out and said that they're not really going to change what they do. I don't believe that. I do believe that they actually will start incorporating more 3 wide receiver sets. But if anything, their skill sets, Jackson Smith and Jigba and Tyler Lockett, a lot of people actually compared them. So maybe they have complementary skill sets. Like, how they're going to use them, I don't know. But I feel like, to me, Tyler Lockett every year is one of those guys. He's like a Brandon Cooks, guy that every year we're just like, all right, I'll just take Brandon Cooks. Now, it didn't work out too great last year, but that wasn't really his fault. But Tyler Lockett has 4 straight seasons at over 1,000 yards, 5 straight seasons with 8 or more touchdowns. I don't see any reason why all of a sudden Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to come in and take targets away from Lockett. If anything, they'll change their offense up and move him more to a perimeter threat and move the rookie inside. So I'm excited to see how that whole situation plays out. I mean, I still like Lockett. So, I'm excited to see if his ADP starts slipping, because people are right now, again, dynasty people, we all love Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's pretty much clearly the wide receiver 1 in this rookie class. But I'm excited if I can get Lockett for even more of a discount, another round discount, as a really, really solid wide receiver 3. I'm all about it.
Brad?
Yeah, there's almost 90 targets of wide receiver that weren't Lockett or DK Metcalf last year. And there were 3 tight ends who had at least 30 targets, Noah Fant, Will Dissly, and Will Parkinson. And I think, you're going to see a little bit whittled down there. So I think there's room for JSN to eat. Right now, Jackson Smith and Jigba is going as wide receiver 37 on the FFWC. I think that's undervalued. In other places, I've seen him creep into the late 20s. And we know what the rookies offer spike week wise come week 14, 15, 16, 17. There's just so many studies that are done about how during the second half of the seasons, during the last quarter of the season, these types of elite wide receivers tend to spike. And so if you're drafting, there's no reason that you should be passing on JSN that late.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I totally hear you with the rookie receiver stuff, but this year was a kind of a strange year where all these rookie receivers went to these stacked receiving corps. You got Johnston with the Chargers. You got, JSN with the Seahawks. Edison's got a nice little spot there, but they just kind of landed in these crazy spots where they're like the third option on their team.
Yeah.
Seemingly out of the gate. I mean, listen, Smith and Jigba was ranked a higher prospect than DK Metcalf. He could be a better receiver going forward than DK Metcalf, and Metcalf's ranked so much higher in ADP right now than him. So
I think Metcalf is overrated for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think as a player or an ADP, you're saying, or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I think Metcalf is a good, solid wide receiver too, but he's being drafted at wide receiver 16 on the FFWC. I think that should be more wide receiver 18 to 20. Like, one guy who's going after him, DeAndre Hopkins. I think Hopkins needs to be ahead of DK Metcalf, but whatever. But
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. It kind of sometimes it feels like and I totally understand what you're saying. Sometimes it feels like we're splitting hairs, but a lot of times too with these tournaments, like it depends on week 17 we've got Steelers Seahawks. Like I kind of love that little sneaky game. Like give me Metcalf, give me Lockett, give me the quarterbacks in those games, the receivers. Like you can get them all pretty cheap compared to like a Bengals Chiefs where you're spending all these top picks on these guys. I feel like that's a cheap week 17 correlation with a lot of good players. So all right, last two guys we'll talk about tonight. Dalton Kincaid, rocket ship rising tight end for the Buffalo Bills. I'm a big Dalton Kincaid guy, being a Bills fan from the Buffalo area. We're calling him a tight end, but he's probably going to play, from the word on the streets, he's going to play a lot of slot for the Bills. He'll line up out wide a bunch. So I think he's gone up 19 spots since the NFL draft. He's being, it says he's being drafted as tight end 24 in some FFWC best ball drafts. I think that's also really, really low. Listen, I'm always Mr. Don't draft rookie tight ends because they take years to develop. But if you're going to tell me over and over and over again that he's not really going to play tight end, then I'm going to believe you eventually. So I like Dalton Kincaid. I'm glad. I'm not glad for me that he's rising in ADP, but I think I'm glad for the FFWC people drafting him that they're taking him. Brad, what do you think about Dalton Kincaid?
This is a tight end who had the highest PFF receiving grade of any tight end in this class, higher than Michael Mayer. If his role is strictly pass catching, great, excellent, right. Spike week king. But I think the concern is that we have uncertainty about whether he's going to be integrated a lot into the tight end room, or if he's going to spend the majority of his time with the wide receivers, because there was Cole Beasley buzz of, he can be the slot wide receiver. And if he can put up some Mike Gesicki type of spike weeks, like 4 for 60 and 2 touchdowns, awesome. That's week winning. And there's no reason he should be going tight end 24 or tight end 30, where I'm seeing, based on the links that you guys sent me. I mean, in some places that are drafting right now, he's going as the tight end 11. And to stack with Josh Allen, we know the narrative, though. You mentioned, Adam, about these rookie tight ends, how they just don't hit as well. And that's why I think we need to be both cautious and at the same time willing to stack, because by the time we get to week 17, if the argument stands that he is more of a wide receiver and he's a first-round pedigree player, he's going to have some spike weeks near the end of the season, and that's what we're hoping we'll hold on for during the regular season.
Jody, what do you think of Kincaid?
It's the opposite of Seattle, where we want to see Seattle actually incorporate more 11 sets and less 12. We actually want the opposite here for Buffalo. We want to see less snaps for Trent Sherfield or Khalil Shakir, who are potentially going to be these supposedly these slot receivers at this point. So it just feels like Kincaid is intriguing he is as a prospect, and like Brad just put, as I put on my profile when I wrote him up, he had the highest receiving grade from Pro Football Focus. But it feels like we're drafting him at, or maybe even above his ceiling right now. So I'm cautious with him. He's a guy, it feels like more of a best ball option, like you were talking about those big hit weeks. But overall, if his ADP is going to be comfortably inside the top 20, I get it. I mean, because at that point, if you're waited that long on tight end, you're pretty much going for, you're probably going to be running a streaming option every week anyway. So you reach for the upside. But like I said, it feels like right now he's probably being drafted, at or above his ceiling, which always is a concern.
Yeah, Scott's asking who's a tight end that you could pair up with him early to make up for it. I will show you in a minute here. We're going to go over one of my drafts I did with the FFWC 2 nights ago, and we'll talk about that because I did just that. But yeah, no, Kincaid, I think if he's going to play the slot, I like that. And I think he'll be.
If I can throw one name out there,
sure.
Dalton Schultz, Kincaid. We're going Dalton.
Oh wow.
Dalton's nice little value. He's in that. I was going to say Chig. He's around that same range from tight end 11 to 13 in that area. So if you're like the last guy in your league that takes your starting tight end, and you like Kincaid, well then take a Dalton Schultz, Chig, Tyler Higbee, whoever you have to in that range, and then hurry up and take Kincaid.
Big beast. That's right. So our last ADP mover of the day, moving down, is tight end Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. He's going undrafted right now in a lot of these FFWC drafts. Some of that has to do with them Dallas drafting Luke Schoonmaker, 58th overall. I don't know if Ferguson is that great of a prospect to begin with, kind of like Dalton Schultz. I don't know if Schultz is that great of a player, just a lot of 5-yard out routes. You could take a final pick on Ferguson, as your tight end in the final pick of the draft, if you're stacking them or whatever. I think you'll be okay. I think Schoonmaker is more of a inline tight end, like a guy who's going to stay in and block and stuff like that. So I'm not too worried about him affecting Jake Ferguson. Plus, he's a rookie tight end. Brad, have you had any thoughts of taking Ferguson in some of these drafts?
Yeah, I think this is a Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz scenario where we like the pedigree and draft capital of Blake Jarwin, and there were things to like about him. And Schoonmaker, will have his time. Fortunately, Jarwin's trajectory was hurt by the ACL injury, but Dalton Schultz, it had okay metrics, but same thing with these last round tight ends. So I'm taking a stack shot to differentiate yourself here in the last round. And that's what you want to consider, because if you look at week 17, it's Detroit versus Dallas in a dome. This could be a really high scoring game. You want to pivot off of the Bengals Chiefs game. Yeah, let's go with the Lions Dallas game, week 17. And I think that's a really sneaky pick, that Dallas tight end last round.
Sure. Jody?
Potential track meet there. The Cowboys have and will continue to utilize 3 and often 4 tight ends each week. I personally have Schoonmaker leading the main trio in targets, but like you said, is he going to be more of a inline blocking option versus what we want is whoever becomes that downfield guy, because that's been the successful role for Dallas. So, he's free. Jake Ferguson's basically free. Like you said, he's going undrafted. So yeah, in deeper leagues, you take some shots. Maybe, I don't know how deep league you'd have to be to think about Peyton Hendershot, but he'll see plenty of snaps, and so will Schoonmaker, and they're all going so cheap that obviously we'll have some clarity, by that point in the season when you get to that intriguing matchup that Bradley was just talking about. But I expect them to use all of them. So there's nothing wrong if you're in a league with 30 plus roster spots of taking your shots on these guys.
What a backhanded compliment for Jake Ferguson. Hey,
you can make a 30-man roster.
If I'm playing IDP, I'm going to slide you in there as my tight end 3. I love it. Awesome. So yeah, that's that for the ADP Risers Followers. Check that article out on Full-Time Fantasy there. And now we're going to show a quick draft I did the other night. Maybe some of you guys were in it. This is a draft. This is not a tournament. This is a confined league here. And this is lineup setting. So a lot of, kind of different things that you kind of got to consider. Speaking of Bijan Robinson, he went 5th overall in this draft, but I drew the 7th spot here. We'll go through the super quick. I was ecstatic to get Cooper Kupp. I have him as my wide. I haven't even at least wide receiver 3. Might even be my wide receiver 2. I love Cooper Kupp this year. He would have been the points per game. He was the number 1 wide receiver before he got hurt last year. So he's not even that old. He's like 30. Like if Stafford's healthy, I think he'll be great. So Kupp, Waddle, Higgins start. Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle. T. Higgins is the wide receiver 14 in the 3rd round. I think I remember we were talking about during rankings and projections and stuff with the Higgins. Are you guys okay with Higgins at ADP? I would have loved to have gotten Olave. I definitely have Olave ranked higher, but are you Higgins in that range, Jody?
Yeah, that looks about right. Wide receiver 14. I got no issues with that.
Okay. Brad, are you a Higgins guy, or are you kind of down on him this year?
I'm not a big Higgins guy as a wide receiver 2, but I like him as your wide receiver 3. He just lacks the elite top 5 weeks that we want to see from some of the other players that are going like right before him. Like I know Waddle goes, in the second round, but he went as wide receiver 11. He only went, 3 wide receivers before. But like as I said before, I like Hopkins, as a spike week king. I also like, waiting. If you're going to wait on these wide receivers, I like Calvin Ridley as well later.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. I went with a very kind of a hero RB build here. Generally, you don't take your hero RB in the 4th round, but I went with Gibbs as RB 16, which is maybe a little bit ahead of his ADP. Hindsight's 2020. This is my first one of this style drafts here at the FFWC. I took Deontay Johnson in the 5th round. He's one of my guys this year as wide receiver 29. I love Deontay Johnson. He just projects out so much higher than this, so I had to have him. But looking back at the roster, I maybe should have taken a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who I know we all love, and then have the Gibbs Dobbins, and then have the 2 running backs, 3 receivers to start. So I ended up stacking him with Pickens. Again, it's not best ball, but I went Johnson 29, Pickens as wide receiver 33. I've seen Pickens go higher than Deontay Johnson in some of these recent drafts. Jody, are you a Pickens guy or a Deontay Johnson guy?
I don't understand that. I've still got concerns with Pittsburgh's
Me either.
Quarterback situation. Deontay Johnson outscored Pickens with 0 touchdowns last year. There's no way he's going to have 0 again. So just give him a modest, 4.5 touchdowns, and all of a sudden he shoots up. I don't know how many spots, but he ends up being a really, really solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 every week. So I got no issues with him here. Like you said, in retrospect, Dobbins would have been a really, really nice combo with Gibbs there. But hey, there's no problems with him. You in FFWC, you're able to flex him every week. So, you got to go with it.
Exactly. Brad, are you Johnson or Pickens?
I think one part of the Pickens conversation that's not talked about enough is that he was less than a year recovered from his ACL tear that cost him most of his final year at Georgia. And this guy is a dog. He would have been a 1st round draft pick had he not been, tearing his ACL, and he was just rubbing up against that timeline. So, in that first year back from ACL, we know that wide receivers are their production is significantly hindered. So I think in year 2, we'll see not only the freshman to sophomore bump, but we'll also see he's a full year recovered from the ACL tear. We've seen some highlight reel catches already. He has the dog in him. I think the only limiting factor for George Pickens is the quarterback position. I don't have a lot of confidence in Kenny Pickett himself.
Yeah, I think that's the knock on the worry for all these guys is the Kenny Pickett, who, believe it or not, the last 4 weeks of the season was a very highly graded PFF passer. So if he could take that next step and just be Jimmy Garoppolo, can you be Jimmy Garoppolo? Can you just get to the ball to the guys that need to get the ball? I think they'll both be okay. But yeah, it's one of these early drafts. It's May. Deontay Johnson, he's one of my guys. Super excited to get him. Probably should have gone Dobbins. Johnson's a guy who I think is going to rise over the next, where people are looking at their board and going, why is Johnson going in the 6th round, the 5th round? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So went heavy receiver early, ended up going Trevor. Again, this isn't a tournament. That the stacks don't matter as much. The correlations don't matter as much. There is no trading, but there is free agency. So I went Trevor Lawrence, and then I went Waller. As tight end 7, he's the last guy in that tier for me, and I think it's a pretty big tier with Pitts, Waller, and Goddard and Hockenson. But he was the last guy there, so I was super happy to get him. And then, as Scott mentioned earlier, who was a guy we would pair up with Kincaid earlier, I like Waller there and Kincaid. I kind of had a boo-boo there with the bye weeks. They have to share the same bye week, but again, I can pick up a guy. There's waivers in this league, so I'm okay with picking up a guy for week 13. But thoughts, what are your guys' thoughts on Waller? Do you think he's in that tier with kind of Pitts and Goddard in them? What do you think, Jody?
Yeah, he absolutely tight end 7 for Waller. It feels about like what my projections say he is. I would rather take him like you took him 1 spot ahead of Ingram. I comfortably would take Waller ahead of Ingram, and I probably would take my chances with Kyle Pitts ahead of Waller. So it's about right. And what we just hit on, 7-8 minutes ago was finding a really nice combination for Kincaid, and that fits the bill really, really nicely.
Brad, are you a Waller guy in that tier? Are you a higher on Waller or kind of back end of the tier here for Waller?
Darren Waller's my guy this year.
Love it.
I think it's Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews are the 3 tight ends that are poised this year to lead their team in targets. There aren't any others from my glancing over of these other players. Like those are the 3 that are in a unique position to lead their team, and you're getting him, at pick number 90.
Right.
Absolute smash.
Yeah, no, I like that. I completely Andrews. We'll save that for a different show because I know we're running way over tonight. But Andrews is a guy like he could lead his team in targets. He probably will, but man, there's a lot of options there.
There's more mouths to feed this year, though.
Right. Whereas Waller is definitely going to be the guy, and he goes to a team where the coach knows what he's doing and brought him in for a reason. So I really like that. But yeah, so I went Geno to kind of. Geno and Trevor Lawrence there. Love Geno this year. I know he's an ADP faller, but I mean, weapons galore for Geno Smith. So I've got my 2 QBs with Trevor Lawrence and Geno Smith, my 2 tight ends with Waller and Kincaid. Running backs are weak. My running backs are Gibbs, Herbert.
It's a huge concern. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a huge concern. But again, I would have gone Dobbins again, but also in a league where there's waivers, like I'm totally okay. There's
for not taking a defense, not wasting a roster spot on a guy like Sean Tucker. Why not?
Yeah.
What if he's named starter somehow? For Tampa, that's what you do with those final roster spots rather than take a defense, because you can just pick up, the Browns or whatever you got to do in week 1. You have waivers before the season starts. Use it.
Exactly, and like I think Sean Tucker, like if he passes his physical with the heart and all that stuff, I think he could absolutely be the starter there for sure. Like I think he's better than Rachaad White. Tucker would have been, I think, a third round pick if healthy. He was so good at Syracuse. But yeah, so that was kind of how that draft went, and I'll do a million more of those and some things I liked, some things I didn't, but it's fun, man. Drafting with FFWC, you start 3 receivers, you can flex out a receiver. You generally want to flex a receiver, unless it's super flex, because they just, in that range where they're going, they score more points, especially in full point PPR. But yeah, that's it. What do you guys think? Any final thoughts, comments, questions, Brad?
We're happy to kick it off this year, May 24th. Excited to get the off season rolling here at the FFWC.
Jody, where can we find your stuff other than at JodySmithNFL?
Well, full-time fantasy would be a good start. Either I've got my hands on pretty much every article posted, or at least I help edit a little bit here and there. But other than that, there hasn't really been an off season. It's been kind of quiet, but been busy behind the scenes doing all kinds of stuff, as we all are at this time of year. So I'm excited for people to start waking up and start getting to be slightly as interested as the 3 of us have been for pretty much since week 18 ended.
Right. That's right. And Brad, where do we find all your work and all your stuff other than full-time fantasy?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. I've got bestbellfantasy.com. I've been doing articles the last season for FFWC. I've also done some work for Player Profiler. Every Tuesday, Best Bell Fantasy has a YouTube show where we talk about some best ball tips, tricks, and do some analysis there. And yeah, it's been busy, as you mentioned, Jody, behind the scenes doing all the things. So excited to continue moving forward. The school year is almost over, so maybe there's some more free time. Who knows? for me to be, I'm working on projections right now, so those will be. I'm about halfway through. Those will be updated to the website bestbellfantasy.com very soon.
Awesome. Yeah, and I am Adam Krautwurst. You can find me at Adam_Krautwurst, and my podcast also with Mike Shope at Deep End FF1, where we do a lot of high stakes stuff, including these FFWC high stake events. I'll be in at all the events, like you said. I'll be at the Expo. I'll be at the FSGA. I'll be in Vegas for all the high stakes events. And I'm excited to do this podcast with you guys. But
Big time now.
That's right. That's right. Doing all the big time stuff. So, but all right, guys, thanks everyone for joining the show.